Even if the Royals don't make the postseason, in my opinion, it's important that they finish the year strong. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. You also can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering how this channel works, I bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes in length, and Chance Lebo brings you the Locked On Royals postcast, where he goes to you live for about 15 to 20 minutes after each and every game. Before we get started, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. The Royals are off tonight. They will begin a big 3-game series with the Seattle Mariners tomorrow night. You'll see Michael Wacha on the mound. You'll see Cole Ragans make his return on Wednesday. And then I believe it'll be Stephen Kolek on Thursday. I'm actually not sure if the Royals have announced a starter for that game yet. Actually, they have not. The Mariners, they'll counter with Luis Castillo on Thursday. It'll be Bryce Miller on Wednesday. And then it'll be Logan Gilbert tomorrow night against Michael Wacha, who himself is coming off the concussion list. So 2 Royals starters that have been on the injured list, they will be getting back on the mound for this final homestand of the year for the Royals. And I understand for a lot of you, maybe you've already checked out. It's unfortunate that the Chiefs are 0-2. Maybe you're far more into college football. I feel for you K-State fans out there that have started 1-3. KU fans, you're 2-1. Missouri, you're still undefeated. So maybe you got that going for you. But I wouldn't fault you guys out there, the big football people, if you've already checked out on baseball, because the Royals have fallen out of postseason contention for the most part. There's 12 games to go. There's 6 back. We can all be realistic and truthful about their situation. But that doesn't mean that these games are meaningless. And if they're not going to make it, I don't really care if they're 500, if they're 10 games under 500, or if they finish a game or 2 out and they make a really strong push toward the very end. The way I view it, you want this team to still have that motivation of finishing with a winning record. Because in baseball, especially for small market teams, having that level of consistency can go a long way. If I were to ask a lot of you out there that have been a Royals fan your entire life, can you honestly tell me, whether you are 20 years old, you're 30, you're 40, that the Royals have been a consistent organization? You really can't, unless you were a diehard fan back in the 70s and 80s. But if you grew up post-2000 or you grew up in the late 90s, you just never got consistency from this ball club. And in my opinion, when you look at consistency, it's those teams that continuously stack winning seasons. And even if they have a year where they don't make the postseason, it's still a winning year. And the more you do that, the more you build that foundation, the better that culture becomes. You establish that winning culture. And the Royals don't have that yet. We can all admit they are not this, poster team for success, right? They won the World Series in 2015, and they hadn't had a winning record until last year in 2024. You don't want to have that inconsistency. You certainly don't want last year to be that lightning in a bottle moment where everything fell their way. They really weren't as good as the record showed, and they made the postseason. They won a postseason series. That's all fine and dandy. But in the end, they fell short in the ALDS, and they really didn't stack up that well against the New York Yankees. But for this team, why I believe it matters a little bit is we can all say the Royals ran into some pretty tough roadblocks this year, right? They lose Cole Ragans early on in the year. All 5, we don't even need to go down the line here, just all 5 opening day starters in that rotation wound up on the injured list at some point. You had some valuable offensive players miss some time. You had some guys severely underperform, though I can chalk that up to performance issues, right? We can't say, oh, a guy not playing well was a roadblock for them. I more so look at what other teams did for them, if they were a bad luck team or if they ran into injuries. And it's more often than not injuries that can be counted as roadblocks. And for the Royals that are so built on their pitching, so reliant on their pitching, when that group gets banged up and exploits your lack of depth, at least early on in the year, that's where you can really say it's multiple roadblocks. There were multiple things along the way that led to this team falling just short of the postseason. The good news is they kept everybody entertained until September. And really, if you're a diehard baseball fan, you're still entertained. You still are going to be tuning in, expecting them to go on a miracle run until they are mathematically eliminated and they can't compete in the postseason. But if this team can end the year maybe 83-79 or 84-78, I know it's a lot to ask for, but that would include them playing spoiler in these final 12 games, certainly playing spoiler on this homestand, and kind of just being able to roll into the offseason feeling better about yourself. And when I was watching that Philadelphia series, I just got this dreading feeling that this was going to be the series that kind of just tipped them over the edge. They were going to fall off a cliff after that. You know, if you get swept and dominated in Philadelphia, you're 2 games under 500, you're playing the Mariners who are red hot, and then you limp to the finish line at, 77-85. It's not a very good record. And that's not one you're certainly going to be proud about. And I'm not even sure you feel great about saying, well, we ran into some injuries there. You did have some bad injuries at bad times throughout the season. But if you're 8 games under 500, you can't really convince anybody out there that you were right there. Yes, you were competitive, but you bottomed out in September. And you just didn't have the horses when it was all said and done. But if you finish the year playing good baseball and you go 83-79, now you can start to convince yourself a little bit, man, we lost some key players and we still had a winning season. That matters to us. And for an organization that doesn't stack winning seasons all that often, that's important to have. Anytime the Royals miss the postseason for the next decade, you're hoping in every single one of those years they were in it till September or the very end of September, and they had a winning record. You do not want to have this inconsistency of, oh, it's great we reached the postseason one of these years, or we got to the ALCS, but then we disappeared and we were irrelevant for 5 years after that. You want to break that string. You want to break that habit, because the 14 and 15 Royals, took the league by storm. Go to back-to-back World Series. They go to Game 7 and 14 and then win in 5 games in 15. Like, that was dominance from that group. The unfortunate part is that after that, they weren't even in the postseason. They didn't even have a winning record after that. So in Kansas City, a small market club, if you continuously put together winning seasons and you establish that winning culture, now you just view that franchise in a different light, where when you go into each and every spring training, you're not talking about, man, they're going to need a miracle to get to the postseason. They really need a lot of things to go right. They need a lot of things to fall in their favor. And if they do that, they might be able to get to the postseason and have a little fun story there. You want to build on this, where every year you are winning between 80 and 90 games. And you're going to have those outlier years too, where you win over 90 and you get a 1 seed or a 2 seed of the American League. And then you become one of those alphas. The alphas right now that you don't feel that confident in beating. I don't believe that I am, miscategorizing that at all, or I am not defining that properly. This Royals team does not stack up well against the alphas. And that's fine for right now. They went from 106 losses just 2 short years ago to the ALDS the next year. It's not going to be this perfect linear trend where, oh, they make the postseason, now they just get better every single year. You would hope that would happen. But this is just what happens with small market clubs from time to time, where you're going to have those great years where you're healthy, you play good ball at the right time, and the teams that are chasing you bottom out. Last year, it certainly happened for the Royals. They had the Mariners bottom out at one point. They had the Red Sox bottom out. They had the Twins bottom out. And that was good for this team. Another roadblock they had this year, that's not about them at all. It's about their division. They had a team like Detroit play with their hair on fire for the entirety of that season, basically. I mean, as we are speaking, doing this podcast, now the Guardians have closed the gap a little bit. They're still 6.5 games back of Detroit with 12 games to go. The Tigers are 20 games over 500. And it feels like they've been that mark for the entire year. You've never really had that great chance of catching up to them. Where last year, Cleveland went through a really rough stretch where you were able to catch them at the very end of August. You're hoping that can be more of the same next year, and you're hoping you're healthier. But these next 12 games are not throwaway games for the Royals. Finishing with a winning record can still go a long way for this team and can give you a little bit more confidence rolling into the offseason where you can try to add more pieces to turn a 83 to 84 win team into a 90 to 95 win team. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about Cole Ragans returning to the mound on Wednesday. Why are the Royals doing it, and do I agree with that plan? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. Two sponsors I want to tell you about, beginning with FanDuel. As we told you earlier, they were our title sponsor. And with FanDuel, we know the NFL season is here, and they are making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And I'm going to go to college football on Saturday. Both Missouri and Kansas are in action. Missouri will be hosting South Carolina, where they're a double-digit favorite. Kansas is a double-digit favorite at home against West Virginia. I'm going to go money line with both of these games. I will take Missouri to take down South Carolina, and I will take Kansas to take down the Mountaineers of West Virginia. Also want to tell you about PrizePicks. And with football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. I got this question a lot yesterday when the Royals, or Andy Rodgers, I should say, announced that Cole Ragans would be coming off of the injured list and starting on Wednesday for Kansas City and their pivotal series with the Seattle Mariners. I got the question, why? I got the statement, this doesn't make any sense. A lot of people were confused why, with the Royals at 500, you would try to bring somebody back who's missed 3 months of the season, and you don't want to risk any further injury. And my simple answer to this is that with guys that are rehabbing, it is always better to keep them in their routine and keep them on track rather than just simply basing your decision on what your team is doing, in the standings. If your team is in the playoff hunt, then no brainer. If he's ready to go, he's 100%, you throw him back out there. If you're not in it, does it make sense? I've seen some teams just shut a guy down. I've seen them do it much easier with a position player because with pitchers, they are a little bit more calculated. It's more meticulous in handling those guys. So for Cole Ragans, you go all the way back to when he was first cleared to start throwing. He starts throwing, just playing normal catch. And then you graduate from just playing catch to, we're going to do a bullpen session. We're going to throw 10 pitches. We're going to throw 15. We're going to throw 30. And then you graduate from the bullpen session and get to those live simulated games. And if all goes well in the live simulated games where you're facing live hitters, they then send you to the minor leagues to go get your rehab outings in. And if all goes well there on a limited pitch count, you're then building to throw again at the big league level. And so for Cole Ragans, who did not have a very good first half of the season, he would tell you that every Royals coach and player would probably say that's not what we expect from Cole Ragans, and it's all right to admit that. But he is somebody that is motivated enough to go back out there and finish this year in a positive way. He doesn't want his last memory of the 2025 season being that blow-up outing he had in St. Louis in that Jack Caglione debut series where he couldn't find the zone. He's getting hit around. He had just come off the injured list, had the groin problem, and then it was the rotator cuff strain. it just all was a disaster. He just never could stay away from the injured list. And if he's cleared to go and he's all 100%, which the Royals would not be sending him out there if the doctors and trainers didn't say he's 100%, he's ready to go, don't even worry about it. There's always a risk in sending a pitcher to the mound. We know that. When you throw that many pitches, when you're coming off the injured list, yeah, there's always a chance that something flares back up. But at this point in the season, to put him back out there, I have growing confidence that they've said, no, it's all good to go. It's healed up. He's 100%. And you keep him within the pitch count restraints, you're not going to have any issues there. But to that point about a guy's rehab process and how meticulous it is, it's safer for these guys to stay on that path, to stay on the regimen, to stay on the plan, than just to shut them down after they've been building their arm back up. Because once they get to the offseason, they try to find a way to stay stretched out, to continue to pitch. And I remember talking to Chris Bubich in spring training, and I asked him about, you were a reliever at the tail end of 2024, really the entire season. You were coming off Tommy John. How did you get stretched out to start? And he goes, well, it's the way you work out in the off season. You do these bullpen sessions, you throw more pitches. You sometimes face live hitters. You just do everything you can to stay stretched out. For Cole Ragans, you want him to go into the offseason with no limitations, no holdbacks. And if you're somebody, as crazy as this sounds, that has been building up, 20 pitches, 40, 60, 80, 100, and then you just stop, it's just a cold cut right there. It's just a cold turkey. You're dropping it. You're not throwing anymore until the offseason. You got to build stuff back up again, right? Because you're just not trained to go from throwing 60 to 80 pitches or 80 to 100 and then just not throw it all again for a little bit. So this is more so about making sure he stays with his routine, he stays with the program, and then you go into the offseason feeling hopefully really good about the way you just finished, but then you get to stay stretched out, you get to work out, and there's no setbacks. There's no limitation, there's no restraints that you're having to deal with here, and that needs to be the goal for Cole Ragans. And if he doesn't look good to close out the year, the positive is he got back out there on the mound, and there's no concern about that rotator cuff strain. And yes, he gives the Royals better chances to win games. He does give them a good chance on Wednesday than a lot of guys they would have thrown out there. I know that the Royals rotation has done a pretty good job in the second half with their depth pieces, but this is your number one pitcher that you're getting back, and hopefully look like the Cole Ragans of last year because everything is cleared. He doesn't have the groin that's bothering him. He doesn't have the rotator cuff strain. He doesn't have all these other distractions that can prevent him from being a frontline starter for this team. But that's why they are sending him back out there with 12 games to go. You can still get 3 starts here. I mean, he can start on Wednesday. Then I imagine he can start on maybe Monday or Tuesday against the Angels. I believe they will play the Angels on Monday. Or they actually have an off day. So it would be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. If he starts on Wednesday, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would allow him to start the opener against the Angels. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would be the regular season finale against the Athletics. So you could have 3 potential starts right there for Cole Ragans to get back into the rhythm, give the Royals a chance to win all 3 of those games, and then take some confidence and momentum into the offseason. I believe these things matter, as you just saw with my first segment about finishing this year with a winning record. There is some value in that. And for Cole Ragans, who did not have a good year for this team, you get the opportunity to finish this 2025 season on a high and give you something to take in to the offseason, right? And I'm sure during this rehab process, he had time to work on some stuff, to fine-tune some stuff, better his command, but it'll be the real deal on Wednesday. And it's against the team that you can play spoiler against. So very much looking forward to that. I'll be out there at Kauffman Stadium covering the game, so I'll be able to talk to Cole Ragans after that and what his thoughts have been all season long and just his ability now to get back on the mound and pitch well for this team. That'll do it for our second segment. When we come back, I want to talk about how the Royals just struggle to stack up with these top dogs in the league and how that needs to change going into to the offseason. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Our final sponsor we want to tell you about is Nutrafol. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There are so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplemental clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Last year, we saw this Royals team, or a different version of this Royals team, I should say, beat up on the bad teams and not really play that well against the great teams. And lo and behold, when this team got into the postseason, they beat up on a struggling Baltimore team that kind of limped their way into the postseason. They did win one game against the Yankees, but when it was all said and done, you could tell that they just weren't as close to that New York team. And this year, we saw this team definitely nowhere near that New York team. They were 0-6 against the Yankees. They won 2 games, I believe, against Boston this year. Seattle, they are 500 against. They split in Seattle, went 2-2 in that 4-game series. Detroit, they really struggled against this year. And I feel I'm still missing another team or two. Houston, I believe. And with the Astros, I want to say they took 1 in Houston and maybe took 2 or 1 or 2 when they were in Kansas City. I'd have to go all the way back to April to look at those numbers again. I want to say they did take 2 of 3. So they went 500 with the Astros, and the Astros are kind of hanging around in the wild card and AL West, first place spot. It's been a very weird division this year because the Rangers, Astros, and Mariners are all right there clumped together. But the top dogs is who I'm going to be alluding to here in this segment. The Yankees, even though they're not a front runner. The Blue Jays, of course, are a first place team, and the Royals took 2 of 3 from them in Toronto. But Boston, New York, Toronto, I will bring them in here for this conversation, though when the Royals played them, they played much better ball than the Blue Jays did. But also, you look in the National League side, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Phillies, the Mets are another team, though the Mets are hovering around the playoff spot at this point in time. And then I also look at another team like, I'm blanking on the last team coming out of the East, maybe. I know the Phillies and the Mets are going to be there, and the Padres and the Dodgers. I'll think of it at some point in the segment. The point is, if you pull up the Royals' record against winning ball clubs, it has not been good the last 2 years. They've been able to stay competitive and be a few games over 500 and get to the postseason, beating up on some really bad baseball teams. And that's fine to get into the postseason. I believe there is some value in that. If you can take care of business against who you're supposed to take care of, you're going to get into the postseason. If you can find a way to maximize those 3-game and 4-game series against last place teams, then you are going to find yourself close to or in a playoff spot when it's all said and done. This year for the Royals, they let some really beatable teams take some series from them, but they also were not good whatsoever against the top teams. And so from the American League side, when I look at mainly Detroit, Boston, and New York, if the Royals were to squeak into the postseason, I don't like their chances against any of those teams. And the way this roster needs to be assembled now, moving forward, is to be able to beat those teams. I think in the offseason last year, you had a group that made it to the postseason, and you were just trying to give them that little extra help, right? You go out there, you bring in Estevez, you bring in Jonathan India, but you also ran it back with a couple of guys that, quite honestly, didn't need to be run back again. And that hurt the Royals in the first half of the season, and then they constantly were trying to climb out of this hole. But when you can't beat those good teams, you can't find a way to go on the road. And baseball's tricky, right? Sometimes you go in there and sweep a really good team. But on a series-by-series basis, when you got a tough stretch of games, man, I feel for the last 2 years, it's been this attitude of let's just survive it, at least from my end. I see a tough stretch for the Royals. I go, just get through that with maybe a 4-6 record if it's a 10-game trip, or let's just be 500 in that stretch because those are some really good teams. The attitude now needs to shift to we can beat these teams. We can go into tough environments and win those games. And that's going to be what separates us next year. Detroit did one heck of a job with that this year. They went into some places and won some tough series, and they just had a team that was able to do it. But when you look at the Royals this weekend in Philadelphia, season on the line, it's late in September. You got to find a way to win 2 of 3. And the Phillies, who knew that they were getting into the postseason pretty easily, they're down a couple of guys. They're throwing 3 starters in the rotation who don't have good numbers. It's not they were throwing their best with, Christopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez. And the Royals got beaten up pretty good in Game 1 and Game 2. They led in both those games, but that kind of goes to my point here, where I don't want to look at that series in Philadelphia or look at that series against the Mets earlier in the year or look at that series against the Dodgers and Padres and go, just don't get swept. Just find a way to take one. That attitude and energy needs to shift into we can hang with these teams. And last year, they were able to hang with some of these teams. There were some competitive, close series losses where they were in it in Game 3, and that's all fine and well. You can hang your hat on that when you're a young team trying to establish yourself. But the only way you can graduate from being that young, scrappy team that wants to give itself a chance is when you start going toe-to-toe and punching those teams in the mouth, where you become that just pesky and nightmarish team to play for anybody late in the season. And it comes down to building this lineup a little bit better, having better depth for this team, and really going out there and just doing it. If you start rattling off a couple of big series wins against top teams in the league, then you're going to be earning that respect. And that's what I want to see next year from the Royals. Because even though this team is not mathematically eliminated, and let's say for this hypothetical, they find a way to squeak in. They have this miracle run, and they win 11 of their next 12, and they knock somebody out of the playoffs. I'm just using it for this argument here. Do you feel the Royals, other than that hot streak, would have a really good chance of getting to the World Series? Probably not, right? Because the rotation hasn't been the same. The offense is too inconsistent. You want to be a buzzsaw for teams. I don't know if they're ever going to be that alpha, right? That's just so tough to knock off in the American League. But Detroit has put themselves in that conversation of being a top dog in the American League. They don't really have that postseason experience that the Yankees do, right? Or the Astros even do. But record-wise, you're 15 to 20, 25 games over 500. You've earned that respect. And that needs to be the goal for the Royals next year. If you're going to fall short this year, and it was, we were just a few things here and there, assemble a team that can withstand that. Losing a couple of guys, and when you're hot, you're really hot, and you feel that you can beat just about anybody in this league. I have no doubt they have that confidence, but we know this Royals lineup is not consistent enough, and this rotation now finally has the depth. But if you put it all together and you go out there and add a few more pieces, you want to be that team that has a healthy cushion in August and September, where you're 20, 25 games over 500. Detroit, who's just been leading this division from start to finish, that's something you absolutely want to be striving for. And that needs to be the goal going into the offseason and certainly into the winter meetings. That'll do it for our first episode of the week on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day. For your second, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to preview that big series with Seattle. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.